Welcome to Faith, Fiction, and Folklore, where we try not to F the podcast.
Failure.
I love that. Today,
We already did that.
Today we're going to talk about USAID.
Again.
Jamie Benz, is that right?
Mike Benz.
Mike Benz.
Mike.
I don't know who that is.
You might
Gary.
It's just some
Mike
guy
Benz.
that was on Rogan the other day.
Yeah, he's on Joe Rogan. So Mike Benz has been studying this whole USAID situation for a very long time, and they've basically had their fingers in a lot of pies. They've been overthrowing governments. They've been hijacking media. They've just been in all sorts of nasty nonsense. And so I wanted to focus this week on one particular point because we already did like a very broad conversation about it, but I wanted to focus on one particular aspect, and that is the drugs and the hip-hop culture in USAID's role in that. So we wanted to talk about it and kind of maybe just discuss the CIA's role in pushing drugs all over the world, because America's got such a great intelligence service. It's fantastic.
America runs on Coke.
AIDS.
I was going to say Duncan, but
All right.
Coke and donuts, AIDS.
Here we go.
Yeah. So first, hip hop.
Yeah.
Okay. The thing that you think you're going to get in trouble.
To use.
What does your video sound like? Go to
What,
artlist.io.
oh, gosh.
The
Like an
best
ad.
music and
It's
sound
an ad,
effects for
guys.
your videos.
I've got to
the
get that
critical
ad
components
blocker.
they have there, and sometimes
It
dominant
won't
spot
work.
they have there, to weaponize those assets. And that gets back to this sort of EU fight. But I can pause and move to Brazil if you want.
Pause. I have to pee.
Okay.
When I come back, rap music, Brazil.
Yeah.
All right. We're right back.
You
All
should-
right.
sure
We're
that-
back.
listen to
So
Joe
first,
Rogan pee?
hip hop.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Okay. The thing that you think you're going to get in trouble for.
Oh, you're going to make me do this.
Well, you already teased it.
Easer.
I pooped a hammer.
I think it was the 2009 national
Was it just me? You guys are talking. I can barely hear you.
You don't want to hear us.
Maybe not.
Just
We're
that
talking
long
about
pause and
stuff.
a smoothie sandwich.
Yeah. Is it just me, or did that pause seem to communicate I'm going to die for saying this? So.
It did.
Possibly.
Yeah.
I bet he's fine.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
You might get USAIDs for it.
Oh.
Either that or that
Oh.
long pause was him. That long pause was just him sitting there. His stomach is like gurgling because it hurts. That long pause is just him like sitting there like, ooh.
It's not fear. It's just constipation. So.
Or the fear of constipation.
Oh, there you go.
Democracy, Cuba Rap, Journal of Democracy article that I believe was co-authored by Ned's founder, Carl Gershman, who openly said that Ned does what the CIA used to do, that they effectively took the baton from it. And again, the CIA has copies, according to the Washington Post and New York Times, of every grant Ned makes. When you look at the analysis, the in-house analysis done by Ned there, that there was this dense interplay between the Afro-Cuban population and the drug networks in Cuba. And then you look at the role of hip-hop and drug culture in retailing what is wholesaled in, obviously, USAID, CIA, Pentagon, narco networks. Like, for example, we talked about the Mujahideen narco network. They even set up a CIA bank right there to back it. We did the same thing in 1960. USAID set up in 1961. At the very moment, 2 weeks before USAID was created, JFK awarded the Green Beret to the Special Forces. Just 2 weeks before that. Then he creates that was October 1961. November 1961, he creates USAID. December 1961, 1 month after, he launches Operation Pincushion in Laos for the U.S. Special Forces to train and recruit hillside guerrillas in Laos, who are primarily funded by the drug networks that they sit on in the Golden Triangle. They sat on the opium, of the Golden Triangle and the way they financed their own guerrilla war, CIA-backed war. And this is all well known. Ving Pao was the CIA. It was the commander there of the CIA mercenary rebel forces there. This is 1961 to 1967 in this period that I'm talking about. Special forces go over there to recruit these hillside guerrillas. They form an army. Ving Pao is made the head of it. This is going to connect to the rap thing in a sec. Ving Pao was financing the CIA's mercenary army by retailing the opium from Laos into these networks in Southeast Asia, like these CI proprietary banks, like everyone can look up Nugan Hand Bank or Castle Bank and Trust, these CI banks that were set up to launder basically drug proceeds. And they all got in a lot of trouble for this a few decades ago. Now, the problem is they couldn't sell enough because they were a scrappy little upstart, group of hillside guerrillas. So what did USAID do in 1967? This is the 1960s, how long this has been going on. So they were recruited by the Special Forces. They were managed by the Central Intelligence Agency. USAID provided the financing, and this is all according to and in the Senate testimony of Professor Alfred McCoy. This is his book called The Politics of Heroin in Southeast Asia. He testified in front of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee in 1972. He detailed all this in his book. But USAID financially provided the financial assistance for Ving Pao and his narco-terrorist network to purchase 2 airplanes from 2 CIA proprietary companies. One of them was Air America. Another one was Continental Air Services. Both of these have been revealed in subsequent years to be CIA proprietary airlines. So the CIA commander, the commander of the CIA rebel army, buys 2 planes from 2 CIA airlines and then uses them to traffic and retail the drugs by selling them to the market in Vietnam, where we had Special Forces boots on the ground. So basically it was wholesaled by the CIA in that case. And then it was the logistics for that network were provided by USAID. And then it was retailed to poor, unsuspecting souls all over Southeast Asia. Play the same game in the Golden Crescent with Afghanistan. Play the same game with the cocaine trade in its route from Peru and Bolivia up into Colombia and then up into the distribution networks in Miami, Los Angeles, Chicago, you name it. When you start having organized crime and drugs as the front end that retails the products and services that are wholesaled and part of a intelligence or military operation, you can't sell those drugs by having someone with a Department of Defense ID badge on the street corner, on 187th and Broadway. There are retail networks for that, and that is the role of many of these drug mule and organized crime networks all over the world. And I have serious concerns about networks in Chicago. I mean, Gary Webb obviously wrote all about this in Dark Alliance, and there's all sorts of fantastic books on all of this if you want to read more, like Operation Gladio by Paul Williams. There's so much in this field, but Gladio, the role of narcotics is.
Sorry, what, Jeremiah?
I was just making the comment. He mentioned Operation Gladio. I don't know if you guys have looked into that one. It's absolutely wild. Like, implicates the Vatican, implicates the freaking mob in America. Like, yeah.
Well, tell us about it, because we're noobs.
I can't speak a whole lot to it. I can tell you the details that I heard. It's from I think I mentioned it on the last time I was talking with y'all, the Y-Files. It's a podcast. But yeah, Operation Gladio basically financed toppling regimes in different places in Europe, I believe during the World War II era. And also worked with, I don't know, I can't really get too much into it because I don't want to get details wrong. But I remember that the Vatican had a lot to do with financing like different operations having to do with Gladio, and that different mafia members, like different mafia bosses, like stateside in the United States, were brought on board to participate in it. Like it reached into organized crime, like all over the Western world.
Crazy.
It is a whole crazy thing. But yeah, but what he's talking about with basically financed, like federally financed drug running, that would explain like the probably the larger part of the giant war between our two-party state over the border.
Yeah.
It's like it has way less to do with compassion for individuals trying to find their way across the border, and way more to do with keeping like these really seedy, incredibly unethical trade routes open.
Yeah, revenue
Like
streams for the CIA.
Sorry, what, Cody?
Yeah, like if you secure
Revenue
the border,
streams.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, if you secure the
if
border,
you secure
you're
the
cutting off
border,
your
you're
own
screwing
neck.
that up.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cody, sorry, Trevor, have we heard
Yeah,
anybody
so-
from chat? Heard anything? We got a little intense there for a little bit, so I don't want to ignore anybody.
Not on this subject matter, no.
Well, what about the previous subject?
For a minute there, I got sucked into what this guy's saying. Like I've heard of Mike Benz before because a lot of people on X are talking about him right now. But
Yeah.
like I really got sucked into what he was talking about here, and I forgot that we were on a show for a second. I was like, oh
Yeah.
my God.
Yeah, I was like, crud, this has got to be transformative. So
Yeah.
Yeah. It really makes me think of like Training Day, like the feds are at the top, like
yeah,
doing like supplying all the drugs, and like the cops are just like managerial class for all the gangsters that are doing the drugs and selling the drugs.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So Trevor, sorry, did we have anybody? I
But
just want to make sure we
yeah.
got everyone.
No, that intro and I, we got to talk about The Chosen, the show.
Oh, okay. So
And then he did have
New
one
season of
last-
that next month, I think.
oh, nice.
And then he did have one last thing as we were exiting,
Okay.
but we'd already. You want me to read that?
Yes, go ahead.
Just scrolling. This is bad intro. Just scrolling through some church fathers on the sop. It seems the conversation gears towards the sop being water and bread being spiritual separation from others
Mhm.
that Judas never received, called the Eucharist. And then he's like, could make a whole episode on did Judas receive the Eucharist?
There you
That's
go.
that goes back to what I was saying earlier about like what Judas did by taking the bread and eating the bread like a reverse Eucharist. Like he was basically bringing condemnation on himself by doing that.
Yeah, I'm not
Because
sure.
like you have elsewhere where St. Paul talks when he's instructing people on how to treat the Lord's Supper, and he's chastising people for getting drunk when they have the Eucharist together, that he's saying this is why a bunch of you are sick and dying,
Mhm.
like because partaking of that unworthily, like without the proper disposition, can actually have physical consequences for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's certainly
Yeah.
interesting, but I guess we need to keep moving. So,
Yeah, and then he gave his opinion on William Donahue.
okay, yeah, well, let's go ahead and read it. We need to make sure if somebody writes, we got to make sure we read their comment.
William Donahue seems like the type to put his Bible under the pillow and wake up with new ideas.
The kingdom is
Osmosis.
within.
There you go. What'd you say, Cody?
I said the kingdom is within.
Well, there you go. Back to the
that's-
CIA
that's-
and drugs. So,
And then you press play, and Mike Benz is like, and they were funding all kinds of stops coming over the border. Like, oh, crap, this again.
in financing black budget military covert operations in every major place they spring is a black box that is not my crusade. I frankly, again, I wish we didn't even go here but I do feel like you do need to have a side-eye glimpse into some of these worlds to understand internet censorship, because you are going to find USAID NGOs. If Bukele had not done the radical reforms that he had, the internet would have been completely censored by USAID and the State Department in order to rig hearts and minds against him, because they would want to stop him from cleaning out these drug gangs. He would stop him from cleaning up the crime. You're going to see the same thing about fact checkers in Pakistan, and for example, according to the Gray Zone report on USAID and NED in Bangladesh. And in fact, this is actually, I believe, on the U.S. Embassy in Pakistan's U.S. Embassy in Pakistan's website, the Countering Misinformation training seminar they had with the guy who's now the top foreign advisor in Pakistan, and they brought in the executive director of PolitiFact, flew him all the way out to.
This is your brain when you're struggling.
Hey,
to
look,
focus.
another ad.
And this is your brain when you're in the zone.
The U.S. Embassy in Pakistan to train journalists about
what?
That intro is going to head out. Church in the morning. You all have a good night. No need to read that out loud.
Bad intro. Thank you very much for listening. We really appreciate you commenting and interacting with us. It means a lot. We're obviously starting out the channel, so any interaction is always very much appreciated, man. So you have a great night. We'll talk to you later.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Cody?
I don't remember.
Yeah, you want me to pause. So, no, you don't remember?
I did?
Yeah, you said pause. Or somebody said pause.
No,
Pause.
Pause. Maybe I'm schizophrenic. I don't know.
I was just thinking about dogs, I guess.
Dogs,
And pausing.
We're getting tired, guys.
about how to counter misinformation. These same journalist training seminars we're seeing Internews do, we see SEPs do, we see the Atlantic Council do. But I come back to the U.S. Institute for Peace on a live URL as we speak, not even 2 years ago, made an impassioned plea to the Taliban to keep 95% of the world's heroin flowing. You have to explain that to the American people. That is the State Department's policy. If U.S. Institute of Peace is not going to go rogue against the State Department foreign policy there, because they're funded by the State Department. You see the same thing with these ISIS terrorist drug narco networks. Anyone remember the WikiLeaks email, Jake Sullivan to Hillary Clinton while Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State? ISIS is on our side in Syria. Well, that means the more of those poppy crops that get retailed off to ISIS networks, the more powerful and well-financed they are, the more they can pay their soldiers or stop their soldiers from defecting from being mercenaries. And lo and behold, that same network just toppled the Syrian government. And I should note, structuring through USAID is the sauce to this, because there is a sitting tweet from the U.S. Embassy in Syria.
Sorry, what?
Pause it. I know what he's saying is true, and it just pisses me off to no end, because right now, currently, this is the battle going on, especially on X. There's a whole bunch of people, making their own impassioned pleas on behalf of USAID, pointing to all the good stuff they do. I even have a friend that I served with in the construction battalions that's doing this right now, where he's like, USAID offers, all this food to people who are displaced by war and violence. They help them. They build schools.
But they caused the war.
So they're bringing up all of the stuff they do as cover, right? Because dummy, they have to do good stuff here and there, right? Because if they're just being cartoonishly evil, like the robber with the sack with the dollar sign on it, running out the bank and not doing any acts of charity here and there to distract from it, then of course everyone's going to know.
Right.
They have to do some good stuff to distract from what they're doing. And that's why I was saying this is pissing me off to hear this, because I know he's right.
Mm-hmm.
All of these wars, it's to help the war profiteers keep making a buck, but at the same time, it's also we have alternate streams of revenue, and particularly with nations in the Middle East, that has a lot to do with drugs. And This is all like sending our own people to die, to fight and die,
Yeah.
Wars are bullshit.
to make people rich. It always goes back to that, sending young men and women to go die so people can get rich. And it's so maddening.
Yep.
You're not alone. You're not alone in that thought process.
Yeah.
That's why, like, I've had like 4 or 5 offers in the last couple of years, like from the Navy. Like, they've had recruiters close to my old duty station reach out to me. They don't do it anymore because I've turned them down enough. I've been offered like $10, $15, $20,000 signing bonuses to come back, and like that's what I tell people when I'm like, and I say no every time. I could use $20,000. Trust me, that could go a long way for me. That could help me out with a lot of stuff. But no, I can't work for those people anymore. Like after I started learning stuff like what Mr. Benz here is talking about, I was like, I cannot be part of this.
Yeah.
Now that I know, if I was ignorant and I didn't know that this kind of stuff was going on, then I could just go about my way. And there's people currently serving right now that do know this stuff is going on, but they have no moral or ethical, grounding in any kind of faith or philosophy that demands accountability from them. So they just keep doing it because they're like, whatever, it's a paycheck. But I have that grounding, particularly in Christ, that helps me delineate between good and evil. And I know this is going on. And because of those 2 factors, I can't do it. I cannot work for those people anymore.
Well said. Yes, you're right. This has to get fixed. I mean, they're in the middle of it, but I don't know how big a fight they're going to put up. So.
Yeah, I'm happy a bunch of it's being exposed right now. I tell my friends and family, like, this is kind of stuff that we all already sort of knew was happening. But now we're seeing the fine print detailing exactly how it's happening because it's being exposed, like drug into the light.
Yeah.
And still, I don't know who to trust because I'm like, what if they're just telling us, like bits of it, but not the whole story? Because what if it implicates them as well if they tell the whole truth? I don't know.
No, I think you're right. I think that's why they relied so much, like they hated Trump so much because he wasn't connected to those circles. And man, I think that just by itself. Yeah, he didn't need him, and they couldn't buy him off, and he was just a construction guy from New York, and that was the most dangerous thing that could happen to him. So I think, and that's why.
So they basically had to turn him into a cartoon villain to get everyone to hate him.
Yeah, yeah. So.
Like, can you believe this rich guy goes out with porn stars? Like, wow.
It's like
that's unprecedented.
Yeah, like wow, that's exactly what I would expect to happen, but okay.
And then he paid her money to not talk about it.
Again, like that's never happened before. This is horrible.
Yeah.
Not approving, just saying I'm not shocked. So.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that I think he's this morally, amazing guy and he's got fantastic character. But like, if you got to point to his past sins just to deflect from the corruption that he's trying to deal with right now, it tells me that you're not interested in the truth and you're more interested in just being comfy, just being so cozy.
Well,
and,
there's a lot of good, well-meaning people that have, a moral center, as it were, in Congress that get bought off. I mean, they just get chewed up by that system. You need somebody who's got enough resources to be independent of it and not, have enough money to fight back, number one, but just not be bought off in general as well. So, I mean, that's why they didn't like him. He was a billionaire. He had his own resources.
Right. Like the insider trading that we all know, both Republican and Democratic Congress people and senators are guilty of. Like I remember even being disappointed to find out that like somebody like Dan Crenshaw is currently becoming rich off of his position.
Yeah.
He's playing the stock market according to what he knows is happening in government. And it's basically like, how sometimes like in a gangster movie or in a show about gangsters, like some guy will be in a bind. So he'll go to a mob boss and like ask for help. And the mob boss will pretend like it's out of the goodness of his heart that he's giving him this money.
Yeah.
And then like, oh yeah, let me help you out. I'm doing this for you. And then when he comes back later to ask for more, he's like, nope, you're mine now. I'm not giving you any more money. That tap is cut off. But because I've given you all this money, I own you now. I feel like it's the same complex for a lot of those Congress people and a lot of those senators. Like they've made just millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Even though that is that isn't, money that they would get just off of their salary. They've made millions of dollars off of their position, so they cannot betray their position because they'd be betraying like the honeypot, essentially.
It's a bad deal.
So they'll just do whatever it is, whatever the agenda is. They'll just fall right in line, go right along with it.
Yeah, exactly. Trevor, you got any thoughts, good sir?
No, I agree with you totally.
What?
Yeah. What?
What'd you say?
I agree with Jeremiah on that part.
Yeah. We're all in agreement, huh? So.
Yeah, you spend like so much of your life after you learn about these things just trying not to become despondent over it because it is just so awful.
Mm-hmm.
Like knowing the usury, the corruption, like that's happening to us that we can't do anything about it at this stage. Like the enforcement arm of the government has evolved to be so large and so strong that like anything that we try to do against it would just crush us. And it's hard not to over that.
Yeah.
The hard part is knowing the corruption and then trying to explain our perspective to someone who is just full of
someone whose eyes are shut and they're just asleep.
They listen to the news on TikTok,
mm-hmm.
and then it's just it gets in a tight spot.
Yeah, it makes you really, really empathize with what's the name of the main character in 1984 again? I can't remember his name.
Oh,
but
Wilson. I'm probably getting that wrong.
I'm not sure. It makes you really empathize with his character, though. Winston, yeah. Because he gets to a point in the book where he sees, okay, now I know the corruption that's happening. I've seen the extent of it. But he simultaneously recognizes that there's nothing I can do about it. And when he finally gets that glimmer of hope, spoiler alert, I guess, but the book is like super old. So if you haven't read it by now, get good, son. But he recognizes all the corruption, but he also recognizes like, great, there's nothing I can do about it because they're too powerful. And once he finally gets this little glimmer of hope that something can be done about it, it's all an inside operation that ends up betraying him and basically throwing him right back into the system and brainwashing him all over again. And it's just so depressing. I remember finishing that book and being like, damn, that's depressing, but also being like, that's it though. That's the game. Like that's the game that we're currently playing. That's the tyranny we live under.
I think
that's why I'm so attracted to the idea of Christ like restoring everything.
Yeah.
At his second coming.
I'm a little more optimistic, perhaps naive, but I have that advantage, I guess. I think we're gonna.
There has to be a little bit of that.
Yeah, I think.
I hope so. I really hope so. I want to be wrong about that.
Yeah.
Like I want it to be true that stuff is that we're gonna fix it. Like Robert Neville and I Am Legend. We're gonna fix this. Like. I just don't know. I don't know if it's something that we'll be able to figure out without submitting to our creator.
Well,
like I think in order for us to resolve these issues, we have to submit and like be washed, be made clean, be forgiven.
Well, I think
as a nation, not
as
individuals.
Well, I think every generation has its fight. I think this is ours, and then we'll win or lose this thing, and if we lose, the end of the world happens because Russia and Ukraine, nuclear war, and all that good stuff. But if we win, there'll be another fight for the next generation, and that back and forth will go on until the end. But we're called to this time to fight, and I think we'll win this round. I mean, I never imagined people would hate the media as much as they do now. I mean, there's been progress. There's been a lot of progress, things I never thought I'd see in my lifetime. I mean, the JFK files are about to be released. I mean, I'm sure half of them will be redacted, but we already pretty well know that, the story's a lie. And that when I was a kid, I mean, good night. If you believe that JFK was assassinated by the CIA, you're a nut. Now it's like, well, duh. I never thought that was going to happen in my life.
Yeah. Like Seinfeld even made an episode about it, like making, like at the time, like in the mid '90s. I think they had an episode out, like basically making fun of Kramer for being the one delusional conspiracy theorist in the group
Yeah.
that believed in the magic bouncing bullet theory about the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah.
They made him look like a loon. You know, they made the crazy guy the only one who believes the theory on purpose. And yeah, and same thing with MLK too. That's another thing that we all know deep down. Like, that man wasn't just assassinated by like some white supremacist dude.
Yeah.
Like, he was actually well on his way to changing part of the character of American society, and feds didn't like that.
I don't think so at all.
He had to go.
Yeah.
You don't?
No.
Which part do you
No, I
disagree
think-
with?
MLK. I think he was trying to make everybody feel like a victim.
Okay, so you think MLK's a bad guy. All right. You want
I
to
think he was
elaborate on
actually
that?
a Fed. I think he was actually a Fed. And well, not a Fed, but he was put in place by the Feds.
Well, those files are coming
No,
out, so we'll
when-
see, won't we?
I'm very excited.
So when, like, for instance, when the FBI threatened him with like tapes that would have like revealed his adultery to his wife, do you think that was like MLK was stepping out of line with the plan they had together, so they had to whip him back into shape, or like, what do you think
It
that was about?
Probably blackmail that they got on him to make him do what they wanted.
Well, yeah, but then he ended up not doing what they wanted. That's what I'm saying. Like, why?
And then they
if
killed
they
him.
If he was put there, yeah,
Okay,
but
I
if he was
understand what you're
put there
saying.
by the feds, why? Like, why would they have threatened him with that? Was he stepping out of line with the plan they made together? And if so, how?
I guess I don't understand the question.
Well, it's the FBI's action to MLK doesn't make any sense of him being a Fed. They killed him, then they blackmailed him. And from my own perspective, little I know about history, I mean, LBJ hated the fact that black people were getting the right to vote and all this. And I mean, once they actually had that equal standing in society legally, he immediately set about to destroy their culture. That's what was it? Great Leap Forward? Was that what it was? His prosperity program for them?
Great Leap Forward.
Yeah, so, I mean, the fact that he was empowering African Americans, I don't think that set well with the Democrat Party. You know, they have a history with that. They tried to say there was a switch, but there wasn't.
They don't
Yeah.
really empower him, though. They just tell him that the white man victimizes him.
Which you can thank LBJ for that. That's what I'm
Sure,
saying.
yeah.
Like, MLK was, LBJ didn't really care for the guy. And I don't
But
think...
also at the time of MLK's activism, right? So, like, for instance, things that resulted from MLK's work, like, what's it called? Anyways, I'll get back to it. There are certain policies that resulted out of MLK's work that kind of turned into something that needed to be abrogated in today's day and age because they were providing like false equity. But also a lot of what he was working against was like something, the kind of oppression of human beings in society that is objectively wrong. Like there were a lot of abuses of the black population in America that he was seeking to not really expose because everybody saw it, but he wanted to change the hearts and minds of Americans to like see people regardless of race as like fellow human beings.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's gonna smack of victimhood to some people. And like maybe that the victimhood mentality did evolve out of the civil rights movement into like, BLM and a bunch of crap that we have nowadays. But
That's how we have the DEI now. It's the same thing.
I truly believe if we were somehow able to import MLK, his spirit straight into modern society, and we showed him what came of BLM, what came of like
maybe.
Black Liberation Army in the 70s, I think he would be disgusted.
Sure.
Like I think he would have been truly, truly disgusted with what all that
But,
turned
I mean,
into.
My opinion is he was co-opted by the CIA, so that checks out.
I disagree with you. And I feel like I should point out that, the African Americans may or may not have they didn't have a victim mentality, but they were victims. But the thing is, that oppression made them stronger. They had a more stable society than white people did at the time. I believe they were more religious. I believe their marriages were more stable. It wasn't until LBJ started doing that great leap forward stuff that their culture started to implode. Which brings us back to hip-hop and Joe Rogan, which was the thing we were watching before, talking about the destruction
Can I
of...
make one more comment?
Yes.
Real quick. One more comment, and then we'll get back on topic. I know we've kind of gone off on a tangent, but
Also,
one of the interesting things that come from your comment about like the black community, whenever it comes to like their what they've contributed to as far as like moral fabric in society, like having that strong foundation. Have you heard of Dietrich Bonhoeffer? You know who that is?
Yes.
German pastor, World War II era.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that happened before he started doing, his work in earnest back in Germany is he came to the United States because he was a seminarian. He wanted to learn about like theological education that was happening in the United States. And part of his life's commentary is talking about how pretty much everywhere he went, especially on East Coast churches in the United States, as far as like the Christian religion in the United States went, he was horrified by it because it was being like liberalized, secularized, like turned into basically just like, Jesus is a great moral teacher, but a bunch of this stuff about him dying and rising again is just mythology. But it was when he went to visit like the primarily black churches in the South that he saw that the belief and faith in Christ in terms of his life, death, and resurrection was still like very, very alive. That kind of speaks to what you were talking about a minute ago. Like there was an era in United States history, and part of it continues today. There was an era wherein like the black population in the United States was like heavily responsible for, keeping legitimate Protestantism alive in the United States and not ceding it over to liberals.
Yeah.
Secularists.
From what I understand, there was a period where they were much more virtuous and stable than the white communities were. So yeah, and then
obviously it's not a blanket thing. It's not true of all of them everywhere, but there's a lot of the black community.
Yeah.
If that's true, then wouldn't the CIA want to disrupt that?
Which brings us back to Joe Rogan.
They would.
Right.
hey, before you hit play,
Yes.
Jen made it back. She's in the chat.
Oh, hi, Jen.
She asked how we're all doing.
We are fantastic. Bickering like always. How are you? All right, so let's see if we can get to the hip-hop portion where the CIA tries to destroy the black culture.
2017, when Trump was wiping out ISIS, that put a $10 million bounty on the head of Mohammed al-Jilani, the commander of those forces, the current basically head of state in the interim government in Syria. There was a $10 million bounty on his head under Trump. They made the argument that his HTS group was an al-Qaeda spinoff and no al-Qaeda allowed. Well, according to his own military generals, who said this openly in mainstream media after the fact, we were constantly playing shell games with the numbers to hide the troop activity and what we were doing on the ground in Syria and the broader region. If you don't need a presidential finding to finance a terrorist group or a paramilitary group, it's too dirty for CIA. The president won't approve. Run it through USAID.
And what does this have to do with hip hop?
Well, you have these narco networks.
Oh my goodness.
For example, like what I was saying about the USAID bought the airplanes for the CIA for the wholesalers to move it to the retailers. And when you have this intersection between hip hop and the drug economy, hip hop popularizing it, you have a lot of these rappers who've said, we were told by our promoters or our managers to, lean into that stuff. You have the whole organized crime gang. I'll give you an example. This is in Gary Webb's Dark Alliance, where he goes through this network from basically the CIA playing and the Defense Department playing a leading role in propping up these narcotics trades in South America because they were pumping up right-wing death squads and right-wing paramilitary narco gang networks that were violent and effectively shut down left-wing Marxist theology movements who are considered to be pro-Soviet. This is how you have a lot of this, for example, with Iran-Contra and the Reagan years. So he makes a very compelling case about the role of the U.S. intelligence community at the wholesale level in Peru and Bolivia, and at the actual processing in Colombia, and then the movement and transport to the gangs in Los Angeles and Miami and Chicago and the like. And that wholesale movement effectively goes from Langley / Crystal City in D.C., Virginia, to a sort of Hispanic population in South America, into gangs that are retailing it into these Compton gangs, into these these Chicago and Miami and New York ones.
Gangsters.
You have a culture of drug use that creates a market for selling the proceeds so that drugs can be turned into cash, which can then be used to purchase guns. And when you see this just liquid seamlessness there, and then I don't want to tax Jamie too much, but this gray zone report in Bangladesh has specific language with the National Endowment for Democracy and one of its subarms making explicit grants to Bangladeshi rap groups for the explicit purpose of getting people to take to the streets in street riots and protest movements, and to undermine public faith and public confidence and favorable sentiment for the then in power Bangladeshi government. And they were targeting the youth movements. Remember when we pulled up the
Yes.
What he's talking about there with like the Bangladeshi hip hop groups, which without context, like if somebody's just now jumping in, would sound like wild, but what he's talking about with like their lyrics kind of like inspiring people and inciting people, like take to the streets, break stuff, Limp Bizkit style, like, out in the streets. Yeah. That reminds me of something else that USAID has been discovered to have done. I forgot the name of the app. I'm going to try to look it up. But they have been found to have funded, within the past couple of years, a Twitter-style app for citizens of Cuba. Because people in Cuba don't have X. They weren't really allowed to have like a lot of access to apps like Twitter.
Right.
But this app just sort of popped up in the last few years in Cuba that basically has all the same functions as X, where people can share like all of their ideas and stuff like that. And basically what the idea is, the leading theory, because of all of our history with Cuba, with trying to destabilize them politically and assassinate their leaders for decade after decade after decade, the idea is that why would the U.S. be funding a social media app in Cuba? To get them to do exactly what he's talking about with these rap groups in Bangladesh, like use the app to shoot information like onto the screens of Cuban residents all over their little, island country, to take to the streets and overthrow the regime.
Yeah.
Like that's so, because there are people who are so willfully, either they're scared to admit they know the truth, or they're willfully ignorant, that they'll honestly say like, oh, out of the goodness of the United States heart, we were just trying to give these poor Cubans social media so that they could communicate with each other just like we do in the America, just like we do in the United States. Like, no. Why do you think we weren't told about it? Like, if it was just us doing this nice thing for them, why weren't the American people being told that our tax dollars were being used to do something nice for Cubans? No, we weren't told, because it was being used to do what Mike is talking about here, to basically push like motivation to cause like social unrest and political upheaval. Like USAID is all over that, over that.
Yep. So, should we
But
go
they
on?
feed poor people, man. So we need to let them hang around.
Yeah. So, should we go on, or have we established the point as to how they're operating? Does everybody understand what's going on? Somewhat.
I mean, yeah, the CIA is still subverting and selling drugs and corrupting people.
It's just amazing. It's all
CIA
coming
be
out in
doing
public.
CIA stuff.
Yeah. It's like we all suspect it, but we're not allowed to say it, except until now anyway. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
well, I think that pretty well covers it. I had a lot more I wanted to say about it, but we still got one more topic to cover. And we're about
One more
3 hours
topic.
in. So, we're going to go ahead and wrap this part 2 up, boys and girls. So,
Jen just said, yep, the 80s was crazy. Program come into play to get kids to read, not to do drugs.
yeah. Remember
Based.
Yeah. We've also been doing this kind of stuff in Africa as well. I don't know if you guys have heard of Andrew Wilson from The Crucible on YouTube,
No.
but he talks about this, one of the activities that the U.S. government was up to when the principle of depop, like depopulation, started to become super popular in, the cultural zeitgeist. Like, we got to have less people. There's too many people.
But not me.
The U.S. government actually, yeah, exactly. The U.S. government actually facilitated dropping these little pamphlets called the population bomb all over Africa, trying to get Africans to stop, generating more people, like trying to get them to stop.
They've been trying to stop people from doing that for years with vaccines.
Oh, we're not allowed to say that, Cody. Shh. Shh.
He just gets like blown out the back of his wall.
Yeah.
Just call them vacations. We'll know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Just say vacations or the jibby jab.
I
Has the
can't.
algorithm caught the jibby jab yet?
I don't know how to censor myself, guys. I'm sorry.
Jen said she lived in the ghetto at the time.
Yeah, there's a lot of funny business going on, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, I think we're going to move on to part 3.
Part 3.
Part 3.
Everybody, we're not leaving. This is just a break.
Yeah, we're not leaving.
This is just a break so I don't have to edit as much. So, okay, here we go. Guys, thank you so much for watching. And
Thank
the
you.
CIA ships drugs. Good night. No. So... We hope you enjoyed this episode of Faith, Fiction, and Folklore. If you did, we would love it if you would subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Rumble. We can also be found on X, Instagram, and Facebook. And we are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. Thank you again very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.